My mother yelled at my 10-year-old son. "You're useless, just like your dad." My son hugged me tight and said, "It's okay, Mom. Someday she'll wish she was nice to us." 2 years later, she was at our doorstep, with nowhere else to go. "Is she staying long?" Jonah asked quietly, stirring the spoon through his cereal without looking up. "I don't know yet," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "She doesn't have anywhere else." He nodded once, not meeting my eyes. "It's okay, Mom. Someday she'll wish she had been nicer to us." Those words haunted me. Because he had said them before, 2 years ago. The first time my mother hurt him. I've never been the type to air my private life, but lately I feel like I've been carrying the emotional equivalent of a soaked mattress on my back. I need to let it out somewhere. And maybe hear from others who have faced anything remotely similar. I'm 39, divorced, a full-time library assistant in Asheville, North Carolina. I live in a modest home just outside the city limits with my son Jonah, who turned 12 last month. He's smart, gentle, cautious around people, especially adults. I wonder sometimes if that's my fault, or just something he inherited from growing up around too much noise. I was married to Dwayne for 6 years. On the surface, he was charming and responsible. He could say all the right things when it mattered. Underneath, he was all flash and no follow-through. Financially reckless, emotionally manipulative, and allergic to accountability. When Jonah was 6, I left. I had $700 to my name and an old Nissan Altima that barely made it over the Smokies. I thought the hardest part would be leaving. I was wrong. The hardest part was going back to my mother. My mom, Vera, is complicated. And by complicated, I mean sharp-edged, emotionally constipated, and allergic to vulnerability. She was never affectionate. Growing up under her roof meant walking on eggshells that cracked no matter how carefully you stepped. She never liked Dwayne. Ironically, she was right about him. She told me, "He'll leave you broken and poor." She was half right. I left him first. But I was definitely both of those things afterward. Still, when I had nowhere else to go, I moved back in with her. I had Jonah. I needed time. Space. Stability. At first, it seemed manageable. She was stiff, but civil. She didn't talk much to Jonah, but she brought him books, usually math workbooks or logic puzzles. Gifts, she called them. Stimulation, she said. As if kindness needed a measurable outcome. But it didn't take long for the comments to start. "He needs more structure. He's too emotional. Stop coddling him." I thought she'd change. I really did. I thought maybe becoming a grandmother would chip away at whatever ice had formed in her bones years ago. But the truth is, she'd just found a new target. And this one was easier to blame because he was 10, and kind, and didn't talk back. Then came that night. I had worked late that evening, covering for a coworker. I walked in just after 7 p.m. and found Jonah curled up on the couch with his face tucked into his knees. His small shoulders were shaking. He wasn't crying loudly, he rarely did, but his body language said everything. I looked to my mom standing by the archway between the living room and the kitchen. Arms crossed. Brows tight. "What happened?" I asked. She gave a tired sigh, like she was bored already. I told him the truth. "He's useless. Just like his father." Something broke in me. I don't remember the exact words I said, but I remember the heat in my face, and the coldness of her eyes. I remember Jonah standing up, walking to me, wrapping his arms around my waist. And then those words. "It's okay, Mom. Someday she'll wish she was nice to us." We were out of there by 9 p.m. I packed bags while Jonah held our cat, Milo, in the hallway. I called Nina, a longtime friend from college who lived across town. She didn't hesitate. "You can stay as long as you need." We were in her guest room for 2 weeks. I picked up a second part-time job cleaning at night and managed to afford a small apartment on the west side. 1 bedroom. Peeling paint. Wobbly cabinets. But it was quiet, and it was ours. We never looked back. In the months that followed, Jonah flourished. He started a robotics club with 2 boys from his new school. We adopted a second cat, Toby, who made Milo slightly less miserable. I kept working at the library and eventually got promoted to full-time. It was stable. It was safe. I ignored every message from my mother. The voicemails, the birthday cards, the thinking of you texts. I'd blocked her number, but somehow the letters would still show up once in a while. She never apologized. Just vague lines like "hope you're doing well" or "it's never too late to reconnect." I didn't respond. I couldn't. And then, just over 2 years later, she showed up on our doorstep. It was a Wednesday evening. I remember because Jonah was finishing his science fair poster on biodegradable packaging and was using way too much glue. There was a knock. Not a frantic one, just a patient, hollow kind of knock. I opened the door, and there she was. Vera. She looked tired. Older than I remembered. Her hair had gone completely gray. She had a single suitcase, and her usually pristine posture had slumped ever so slightly. "I didn't know where else to go," she said. "They sold the building. Rent went up. I tried to make it work. I really did. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. I'm not here to argue, Marla. I know I wasn't. Good to you. Or to Jonah. I'm tired. I don't have anyone else." Behind me, I heard soft footsteps on the stairs. Jonah peeked into the hallway. His face didn't change. He just looked from her to me. "It's your choice, Mom," he said. So I let her in. And that's where things really began. She stayed in the guest room that first night. The tension in the house was heavy, like walking through thick fog that you could feel pressing on your skin. Jonah didn't say much. He brushed his teeth and got into bed early, headphones on, his body curled toward the wall like he wanted to fold into it. I sat in the kitchen long after he'd gone to sleep, staring at a chipped mug of lukewarm tea, thinking of 100 different ways this could all fall apart. Vera had been quiet after I let her in. Not apologetic, exactly. Not remorseful in a way that offered peace. Just subdued. The kind of quiet that came not from reflection, but exhaustion. "I can look for somewhere else tomorrow," she'd said, standing awkwardly near the couch with her suitcase handle still gripped tightly. "I'm not trying to make things hard for you." I didn't answer her then. Just nodded and walked to the kitchen, flipping on the kettle. She followed silently, eyes scanning the room like she was cataloging all the small ways my life had moved forward without her. The next morning was awkward, to say the least. I made coffee. Jonah poured his cereal. Dara sat at the kitchen table, sipping from the same mug she used when I was a teenager, back when she'd sit silently with the newspaper and ignore me unless I was late or did something wrong. This time, she didn't say much, just looked out the window. At some point, Jonah dropped his spoon a little too hard into the bowl and the clang echoed. "Sorry," he said quickly, eyes wide. And for a second, I saw her flinch, just slightly, but it was there. I don't know if it was guilt or just the sharp reminder that she had contributed to a boy who apologized for being audible. The day after, she folded the laundry without asking. Washed the dishes while I helped Jonah with homework. Made herself scarce during his favorite TV hour. For days, it was like she was trying to blend into the walls of the house, become a background fixture no one had to talk to or look at. And Jonah let her. Or rather, he didn't stop her. He was civil, quietly polite in a way that broke my heart more than if he'd shouted at her. He answered her when she asked simple things. Never volunteered anything. I didn't interfere. I wanted to see where this would go. It was about a week before she attempted an actual conversation with Jonah. We were all in the living room, and he was tinkering with a small robot project, some kind of arm extension with basic motor movements, controlled through a mobile app. He was focused, absorbed, tongue peeking from the corner of his mouth like it always did when he was concentrating. "That's impressive," she said, her voice a little shaky. "You built that yourself?" He didn't look up, but he answered, "Mostly. I got the kit for my birthday." "Do you like science?" He shrugged. "I guess." There was a beat of silence. Then she tried again. "You know, I used to work in an office that installed machines like that. Not for kids, though. Big ones. In factories. Still no eye contact." "Cool." That was it. The whole exchange. But it was more than I expected. And it kept happening. Slowly, inch by inch, she started to insert herself, cautiously. She asked questions, not in a prying or controlling way, but more like someone trying to observe a species in the wild. She was trying, and I could tell she didn't quite know how. What shocked me most was that Jonah never snapped at her. He never told her off or lashed out. He gave her a kind of stiff neutrality that showed me he remembered everything, but he had chosen to give her a small crack in the door. One night, I found her in the backyard. She was sitting on the porch swing in one of my old sweaters, the one I hadn't worn in years because it smelled like a different version of myself. She was staring at the stars, and for the first time in my life, she looked small. Not weak, but unguarded. "I've been thinking a lot," she said when she heard me approach. "About the kind of mother I was. And the kind of grandmother I failed to be." I didn't say anything. I just sat down next to her, careful to keep a few inches between us. "I know I can't fix it. I can't undo what I said to him. Or to you." Still, I said nothing. Because what do you even say to that? What could possibly cover that kind of emotional debt? She continued, "I was angry for a long time. To your father. At myself. At the way life turned out. I thought if I stayed in control, I'd never be disappointed again. But I was just lonely. And bitter. And I took it out on the only people who ever gave me a chance." Her voice cracked. I didn't know if it was on purpose. I stared out into the yard. The wind rustled the pine trees near the fence line. "You hurt him," I said finally. "He's still so careful around you. He remembers." She nodded, and for once, didn't defend herself. "I don't expect him to forgive me," she said. "Or you." I still didn't speak. I think part of me was afraid if I opened my mouth, all the anger I'd swallowed over the years would come up and never stop. Eventually, we went back inside. The next morning, Jonah handed her a bowl of oatmeal. Not a word. Just passed it to her, then sat down and started eating his own. She looked stunned for a moment, then offered a quiet thank you. And I realized that, in his own quiet way, my son had begun to offer her something I still didn't know if I could give: grace. It wasn't trust. It wasn't forgiveness. But it was something. There was a new rhythm in the house. Fragile, uncertain, but it was there. Vera started contributing more, small things, at first. She'd sweep the kitchen, tidy the living room, and eventually offer to take over grocery runs if I gave her a list. I half expected her to complain or rearrange the fridge like she used to, back when she lived in that mental space where control felt like purpose. But she didn't. She did what was asked. Nothing more, nothing less. It was strange watching her operate in our home now, like she was both familiar and foreign at the same time. There was no lecture about preservatives or expired yogurt. No unsolicited advice about Jonah's bedtime or screen time. She moved carefully, like a guest who didn't want to overstay her welcome. Jonah began to tolerate her presence in small doses. He never quite warmed up to her, not fully, but he didn't withdraw either. She noticed. I could tell. Every time he offered a polite answer or accepted her help on a small thing, I saw it register in her, like she was grateful for every scrap of acceptance she was being given. Once, I found her in the laundry room folding his t-shirts with the kind of carefulness you usually reserve for glass. She didn't know I was watching. Her hand smoothed the fabric, pausing just slightly before stacking each one. I recognized that look. It wasn't pride, exactly. It was something else, maybe regret that came too late. And despite myself, I began to feel sorry for her. Not enough to forget. Not enough to trust her again fully. But enough to understand that even sharp people can dull over time, and sometimes life grinds them down in places they don't expect. One afternoon, about 6 weeks after she'd moved in, Dara offered to pick Jonah up from his robotics club meeting. I hesitated. Normally, I was rigid about schedules, routines, who was allowed to be alone with my son. It wasn't just about her, it was about protecting Jonah from emotional fallout I couldn't clean up with a hug. But we were short on time. I had a last-minute Zoom meeting at the library, and the babysitter was sick. She noticed the hesitation and didn't push. Just said, "If you want, I can go. If not, that's fine." I said yes. Cautiously. She came back 30 minutes later. Jonah walked in first, earbuds dangling, the smell of vending machine snacks trailing him. Dara followed behind him, car keys in hand. "He didn't say much," she said quietly, setting the keys on the counter. "But he didn't look unhappy." And he didn't. He acted completely normal, went straight to the fridge, poured himself some orange juice, then disappeared upstairs to watch YouTube. Later that night, I asked him, "Was everything okay with Grandma?" He nodded, nonchalant. "Yeah. That's it?" He shrugged. She didn't talk much. Just asked about my club. Then we listened to music in the car. "What kind?" He hesitated, then smirked. "Fleetwood Mac." "She said it was your favorite in high school." I blinked. That wasn't something I'd expected him to say. Or her to remember. The weirdest thing was, I started seeing glimpses of the mother I always wanted, hidden in tiny moments. Like the time I walked into the kitchen and she was silently picking the bad grapes out of the bunch Jonah liked. Or when she offered to take out the trash and remembered which bin was for plastics without being told. One evening, I had a bad day at work. A patron had yelled at me over a late fee, and then the copier jammed, and then my heel snapped walking out to the car. I came home and sat at the kitchen table, exhausted and sore and barely holding it together. Dara put a cup of tea in front of me without a word. It was the exact kind I used to drink in college, the kind she used to roll her eyes at, calling it earth water. But there it was. Warm. Familiar. I didn't say thank you. She didn't expect me to. We just sat in silence. It was maybe 2 months in when she finally apologized to Jonah again, this time when I wasn't around. I only found out because Jonah brought it up casually later, while we were walking Milo around the neighborhood at dusk. "She said sorry today," he said, kicking a pinecone down the sidewalk. "Like. Actually sorry." I looked over. "What did you say?" I told her I know she didn't mean it back then. My heart twisted. "Do you believe that?" He shrugged. "Not really. But I think she knows it now. And that kind of makes it different." I didn't respond right away. He kicked the pinecone again, this time harder, sending it bouncing into a neighbor's yard. "People don't just change, Jonah," I said eventually. "I know. But they can learn things. If they want to." He was right. Damn it, he was right. Still, there were moments where I caught myself bracing for her to snap. Like when Jonah accidentally knocked over a bowl of popcorn, and for a split second I waited for her voice to rise, her patience to crack. But it didn't. She just bent down, helped him scoop it up, and even laughed a little when the cat tried to eat a piece. Those small moments terrified me more than the yelling ever did. Because they made me start to hope. And hope, when it came to Vera, was a dangerous thing. I didn't want to start rewriting our past just because she was learning how to be gentle now. I didn't want Jonah thinking that her good behavior erased the pain she caused. I didn't want to be tricked into thinking people could heal into someone they never were. But I also didn't want to shut the door on something that maybe, just maybe, was becoming something else entirely. That spring brought with it an unexpected clarity. Asheville was blooming, dogwoods exploding in pale pinks and whites, the mountains greening in layers like watercolor, and so was something inside me. Or maybe it wasn't blooming. Maybe it was simply unraveling. A quiet, slow undoing of all the tightness I'd carried around my spine since childhood. Dara had settled into the house like a ghost trying to atone. Never in the way, never overtly warm. Just a present. Helpful. Humble. I had to admit, part of me started to believe she meant it. That she had changed. Or at least, that she was trying. But even in all that softness, something still gnawed at me. The way she had never truly acknowledged what she did to me growing up. The control. The silence. The conditional love. She'd apologized to Jonah, twice, even, but to me? Nothing. No words. Just tea and folded laundry and cautious gestures. I carried that quietly, like a splinter you forget about until you brush it the wrong way. And then, like clockwork, life offered me something unexpected. Jonah had submitted his science fair project, a biodegradable packaging model using fungi-based materials, to a regional competition. We didn't think much of it. His school had a good program, but they rarely placed. Still, he loved it. It kept his mind busy, his hands creative. Then, 3 weeks later, we got an invitation in the mail. Jonah had been chosen for a week-long STEM summer institute at Duke University. Fully funded. Housing provided. A big deal. We were stunned. He was thrilled. I cried quietly in the bathroom after he went to bed that night. When we told Vera, she smiled. A real one. Not forced. You're incredible, she told him. You know that? Jonah grinned, a little bashful, but said, thanks. It was the first time he let her hug him without tensing up. The trip required him to be away for 7 days. I planned to drive him up and back. Dara insisted I should stay at the Airbnb with him and make a little vacation out of it. She offered to cover half the cost. That alone surprised me. The night before we left, we were sitting at the table after dinner. Dara had made her lentil soup, something I'd always hated as a child but now tolerated. Jonah was upstairs packing, excited in the way only a 12-year-old boy could be when faced with science labs and new friends. Dara looked at me and said, I know you don't think I deserve any kindness. And you're probably right. I put my spoon down. But I do see it now, she continued. What I was. To you. And to him. I think about it every day. I stared at her, not speaking. I was so afraid, she said. Of being left. Of being irrelevant. Of becoming one of those bitter old women no one remembers. And I tried to keep you under control because I thought if you needed me, maybe I wouldn't be forgotten. There it was. Not an apology, exactly. But the truth. Her truth. I exhaled. It didn't fix anything. But it acknowledged it. That was something. You were cruel, I said softly. She nodded, eyes down. I know. And your lucky Jonah is kinder than I ever was. She nodded again. I'm not asking for your forgiveness, she said. But I hope someday you'll feel peace around me. I didn't answer. But I didn't leave the table, either. The next day, we left for Duke. The institute was everything Jonah dreamed of. Labs, dorms, enthusiastic professors, kids who loved the same things he did. I stayed nearby in a little Airbnb with a porch that looked over a wide field of pine and open sky. For the first time in a long while, I had space to think. To breathe. To imagine life beyond trauma responses and strained silences. And that's when the idea came to me. I didn't want revenge in the way people think of it. I didn't want to scream at her, or shame her, or lock her out in the cold. I wanted something quieter. Smarter. I wanted her to feel what it was like to be left. But not abandoned, no. That would be too easy. I wanted her to sit in the space where she had to ask herself what came next. So when the week ended, I sat Jonah down. "Would you like to stay up here for the summer?" I asked. "You'd be with a host family. They're teachers from the program. They said they'd be happy to have you." His eyes lit up. "Really? It'd be a good break. You've earned it." He nodded enthusiastically. "Yeah, I'd like that." Then I called Vera. "Jonah's been offered a chance to stay for the summer," I said. "I'll be staying up here, too. Helping with some organizing for the institute. We'll be gone until August." A pause. "Oh," she said. "I didn't realize. That long." "Yeah. The program directors invited me to help with an educational outreach team. Temporary, but it's a great opportunity." "I see," she said, and I could hear the weight behind those words. "Well, I'll take care of the house while you're gone." "Oh, you won't need to," I replied. "I've made arrangements to sublet it short term. You'll need to find somewhere else to stay." Silence. "You're kicking me out," she said quietly. "No," I said, calm and even. "I'm letting you go." Another pause. "But where am I supposed to go?" "I don't know, Mom," I said. "Just like you didn't know where I'd go that night 2 years ago. You'll figure it out. You're strong. Resourceful. Just like you always said." More silence. Then, finally, "Okay." That was it. No begging. No anger. Just quiet understanding. I gave her a week's notice. And in that time, she found a short-term rental room across town. She didn't fight it. She didn't try to guilt-trip me. She simply packed her things and left a thank you note on the kitchen table. 3 months passed. Jonah had the best summer of his life. I worked part-time at the institute, surrounded by people who appreciated me for more than just what I could endure. We hiked, we explored Durham, we had slow breakfasts and late-night talks. It was a joy. Uncomplicated joy. When we returned home in August, the house was clean. The keys were in a labeled envelope on the counter. Vera was gone. I never said she was evil. She was human. Flawed, wounded, and at times, unkind. But she had lived long enough to see the results of her choices. She saw the distance. She saw what she'd lost. She saw how kind Jonah remained, despite everything. And that was the most satisfying revenge I could have ever asked for. She lost her place. Not just in our house, but in our story. And we? We kept writing our next chapter without her.